Welcome to the comeback season, where we have real conversations about fueling your body, rebuilding strength, and stepping back into the life you were meant to live. Whether you've been caring for kids, aging parents, or just lost sight of your own needs, we see you. And this is your season to rise. Hello, my name is Nicole McLeod with Healthy Mind, Healthy Body. I'm a mindset and fitness coach and the author of I Started on a Tuesday. I know what it feels like to lose yourself in the chaos and still hold on to the hope that something better is coming.
And I'm Christy Kelsey from Christy Counts Macros, nutrition and mindset coach and food freedom advocate. I've worked with lots of women who felt stuck, restricted, and unsure where to even begin. Together, we're bringing you honest conversations, healing truths, and real strategies to help you rise again, physically, mentally, and emotionally, whether you've hit rock bottom or you're just tired of putting yourself last. This space is for you because this is your comeback season and it starts right now.
Welcome to episode 5 of the comeback season. Today's conversation is about a space we don't talk about enough, the in between. That place where you're no longer who you used to be, but you're not quite who you're becoming yet. It's uncomfortable, it's messy, and it often feels like something's wrong. But what if that space is actually sacred? What if that discomfort is a signal that transformation is happening? Well, this episode is about recognizing that space, honoring it, and learning how to move through it with grace and strength.
Our guest today, Jo-Dee, calls it the becoming zone, and we're so grateful to explore it with her. Jo-Dee's from the Soulful Conversations. Whether you're on a healing journey, rebuilding your confidence, or learning to trust your body again, the space in the middle can feel disorienting. But it's also where the real work happens. Today, we're going to unpack why that zone matters, how to stay grounded when everything feels uncertain, and how to support yourself while your next chapter is unfolding. So let's get into it. Jo-Dee, welcome to the comeback season. We're so happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Christy. Hi.
To start off, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started the Becoming Zone and how do we know we're in it?
Oh, yeah, beautiful question. Sure. So, I am a social worker by trade. And I guess through the years, I have sort of appreciated opportunities that have come to me. And part of that was maybe avoiding my dream. And my dream was to have a private practice. And I didn't have the confidence to do it. And so I became an educator with my master's degree, and I did that for 16 years. I loved it. It was absolutely incredible, but I wasn't honoring my dream. And so I retired a couple of years ago, and instead of my voice that was saying, "You can't do this," I decided, yeah, I don't know how to be an entrepreneur, but I can learn it. Because I could do hard things. And so that's where it all sort of started, was me really realizing that my inner voice was holding me back from a dream that I'd had for a very, very long time. So I retired a couple of years ago, and now I'm developing my coaching practice. And within that coaching practice, one of the things I do is I do speaking engagements to share what I've learned. And I guess the becoming soul really unfolded when I was actually doing my first professional development day for teachers. One of the things I do is I'm a mental health consultant for teachers who are maybe struggling or just wanting to make sure they're really healthy on their own journey. And so in this professional development day, I followed the script. The audience participated. On paper, it went just fine. But I walked out of that room and it didn't feel fine. I felt embarrassed. I felt like I'd let people down. And my inner critic was just going wild, as it can at times, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, and one of those things that in that moment, that night, hardly slept. My critic was just a going. replaying every moment, every word, every gesture. And when I woke up the next morning, I thought to myself, I can do this differently. And I didn't quite know what was unfolding for me. I didn't have the words for it yet. But as I processed it, what I realized is I was coming from here, who I used to be, trying to come here, but I wanted to jump over that messy middle. I just wanted to arrive and I wanted to do it perfect. I wanted to get it right the first time. And that is where I didn't get it perfect. And yet that was okay. But my critic was insisting that it wasn't okay. And so as I was reflecting on that experience, that's where I started to identify that who I used to be, I'm not quite that person anymore. And yet I'm not quite the person who I want to be, as in, getting back into speaking and presenting and all that kind of stuff. And I was struggling in this in-between space, which now I call the messy middle, because it can be very messy. It can be frustrating. It can bring up uncertainty and self-doubt and lack of confidence. And yet, if we learn to stay in there, sit in that, it can be such an incredible gift, because that's where we develop our confidence. That's where we allow ourselves to get comfortable being uncomfortable, which is the only time we grow. We don't grow when we're comfortable. We grow when we allow ourselves to sit in that uncomfortableness. And yeah, so that is where the becoming zone really was created. It's that old middle ground where old things don't fit anymore, but the new version of us hasn't quite arrived.
That is so beautiful, because the reality to it is when you're emotionally or feeling emotionally messy, it's where really that self-awareness starts to build. It's usually the quietest parts that we're feeling like, we're lost, we're broken, it's not working. But it feels like that because you're not who you used to be, but yet you're still not where you want to be.
Absolutely. And we might not even know exactly what we want to be or who we want to be, right? So then we're sitting in this liminal space where there's so much uncertainty, and that uncertainty can feel so uncomfortable.
But without that messy middle, it's almost like that internal alignment starts to happen, but it won't if you're not in it.
Such a good point.
I love this. I think as women, we often we see the person we want to be, or we imagine the person we want to be, and we learn the things. But like you said, we want to jump to that, having done it perfectly. And we don't allow ourselves that time to grow, that grace of, I'm not going to do it perfectly the first time. I see this a lot with the nutrition coaching that I do. Women become aware of a different way of eating, and then they get frustrated with themselves when they go back to the habits of the yesterday.
It's mind-boggling to me that we all feel unique in the sense that, we don't want to share it. Nobody talks about the messy middle. Nobody says, I'm in this moment, this transition in my life. We don't recognize it. But if you actually stop to think about it, that messy middle is the beginning of so much in our lives. And if I can reflect, and Jo-Dee, before I met you, I didn't even think of the word messy middle. You're becoming. What am I becoming? But it's so true. The whole concept of it is really, once you grasp that and you are intentional with it, that's where the opportunity for growth really happens. So that becoming zone feels confusing, but the discomfort of it often, like I just said, points to the growth. So let's dig in a little bit deeper into that discomfort and why it's actually such a powerful space for change.
Thank you for that, Nicole, because this really speaks to me. This is where it gets juicy.
Yes.
I want to use that word, right? That messy middle. It's so uncomfortable because for a whole bunch of different reasons. It's really quite complicated. There's a lot of interconnectedness that happens in that messy middle. So for one, how we talk to ourselves when we're in that messy middle is so important. Are we judging ourselves for judging ourselves? Or are we judging ourselves because we're not moving fast enough? Or what is our inner critic saying when we're in that messy middle? Well, our critic by essence is not our ally, right?
Yes.
Our critic is keeping us safe, and yet it may also be keeping us stuck. So, being really mindful and aware of what we're actually saying to ourselves while we're in that messy middle. So that's one piece. And then the other piece, and I just saw this beautiful podcast with Jay Shetty and Mel Robbins. And Jay was talking about, he wasn't using this language, but he was talking about something very, very similar to what we're talking about. And he brought in this dynamic of we're actually grieving. We're not waiting, but it feels so uncomfortable because we're grieving who we used to be, and that we're leaving who we used to be. We're evolving, we're shifting, we're not quite over here, but there may be some parts of us that we're grieving, and that keeps us stuck. So it's about
Absolutely.
honoring that, honoring that piece, honoring the grief, so that we can fully step into that new place of who we're becoming.
That makes a lot of sense because that person was probably comfortable living the old life, the familiar ways. And then that growth that happens is really uncomfortable. I mean, you think about a teenager when they have a growth spurt, they often get pain in their limbs because they grew so fast. And I think to some degree we can experience that when we're going through a transition in our own life. We can experience these growth pains. They might not be physical, but I've had times where the people around me, people I love, see me changing, and it's uncomfortable for them because maybe they're not ready for a change, or they're changing in a different way, but they notice, and that it can make some discomfort in the relationship, I guess.
I've said this a few times, and I don't know if it's been on this show, but people like to take comfort in their dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
If it's comfortable, it doesn't matter how toxic it is. That's how we really get stuck in bad relationships, because it's what we know. We feel comfortable in it, even though it's our dysfunction. We're feeling comfortable. And that actually, Christy, what you just mentioned, made me think about the whole fact of DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. As a trainer, it's something that I work through with clients. When you work out, you get sore. That soreness, when you've had a good workout, is DOMS. Like I just said, delayed onset muscle soreness. It happens because those muscles, the little fibers in your muscles are tearing. And they're tearing because they're preparing for growth. But without that breakdown of the muscle fiber, you're not going to get bigger, stronger, and really we can relate the messy middle to that.
That's a beautiful for both of you. Like, I love how even as we're grappling with this whole concept, we're thinking about all these different examples where we or others that we support are actually in this messy middle, and how we have such an appreciation why people want to try and rush past it. But if we do, we miss that depth, that healing, that wisdom that only comes when we're fully present with ourselves in that unknown. And that's why I say that this messy middle is so sacred. It's because that's where that identity shift is truly taking place. It's where, when we allow for mistakes to happen. And I wish there was another word for mistakes. I haven't come up with one yet, because a mistake for me is a teachable moment. And I think it's really important to have those mistakes, or even failures, dare I say, because that is what teaches us how to grow, kind of go, well, that didn't work. What can I try next? And so those mistakes are so foundational for our evolution.
I actually talk about that in my book. And in my opinion, the only bad mistake is the one you didn't learn from. And I
love that.
I like to think of it as a chance of opportunity. So instead of thinking of it as a mistake, it's what did I learn? And I talk about this with my clients. It's so important to recognize, yes, what were my wins, but what were the things in my day that I could do better? And what did I learn from them? Recognizing them, because that is so important during any transformation. If it's fitness, if it's your nutrition, if it's just your mindset, you have to recognize what went wrong. And I say wrong again, dare I say wrong, what could have gone better, and to learn from that, because like I said, the only bad mistake is the one you didn't learn from.
I love that. Absolutely. Isn't it cool how we can talk about, a similar concept and yet use completely different language? And yet it's so relatable, these different languages or these different words we put to a very similar process.
It is so true. So moving on, let's talk about the why this space is so important and how we can relate to it in different ways.
So why is it so important? I think I talked about it a little bit, just in that, if we skip over that part, then we're skipping over the opportunity to heal, to grow, to transform into that in which we're striving for.
Absolutely. But I want to talk a little bit more about that fear transforming into our, let's say, success. Those moments of why we need to recognize that and not look at it as a bad thing.
I do love this, and I think that's really important to think about these transitions and how they're powerful threshold moments, if you will. They're where one version of us ends, and the other is starting to emerge, but in that middle, it can just feel like we're in that free fall. Like, again, we're grieving who we were, even though we're really excited about what's ahead. And when we can stop judging that space and start meeting it with curiosity and compassion, that's where our whole experience shifts. I love asking myself, what's trying to emerge in myself right now? Instead of why am I stuck? What's trying to emerge right now? What's knocking on my door? What's showing up in my body, even somatically, right? That I want to pay attention to because it's giving me a really important message. And
I don't think enough of us realize that, really.
Yeah, even that one question just opens up so many doors for healing and for growth. Hey,
Absolutely. I don't think enough of us realize that the growth we have and the grieving the loss of our old self is something that is important to do on many different levels throughout our life. And, we feel like we need to hold on to who we are, but we all change. We all evolve. And, it's your choice if you want to evolve in one direction or another. But the fact of the matter is understanding that sacred space is so necessary to move, and it's physical, mental, every aspect of your life.
I have a metaphor that fits this perfectly.
I love her metaphors. Let's hear it.
I saw this yesterday. I had to drop my son off at a camp, and I was driving home and got stopped at an intersection. It was a red light. And, I was the first car, and I saw one of those metallic balloons, like it said happy birthday on it. And it had a string on it, and it was floating in the intersection because it was tethered to one of those little plastic anchor things. And it was just it was literally following the crosswalk across the road. And it was just dragging that anchor, just dragging it across the intersection. And I thought, if I could just clip that ribbon, it would fly and be free. Oh. And I think that sometimes we do that. Like, we're trying to drag that old self with us. And if we could just clip the string, it would be free.
Why do we resist that? That's a very good point, Christy. We all resist it. And if we could just let that go.
And I think that's such a good point, both of them. And I think it relates to what you were talking about earlier, Nicole, about, just that whole, oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. It was that whole piece where you said, we want to bring that other person with us rather than let it go.
Yeah.
And so it can be hard for us sometimes to let go of who we used to be, because there might be parts of us that we still really like.
Yes.
And then it's like, is it this all or nothing? Like, do I have to let go of my whole personality or my whole person, or are there parts of me that I can bring with me? So it really is being intentional in choosing. And it does not have to be black or white. When we live in, I used to say the gray, but now I like to say the rainbow of colors, right? When we're in that and it's not black or white, there's so many choices that we have the opportunity, the freedom to make.
Absolutely. I think it's really more along the lines of becoming more grounded within your goals and what you want to become. I think that a lot of us feel silly to even sit back and think about, who do I want to be? It's like when you're a kid, what do I want to be when I grow up? The same idea is, what do I want to see myself doing? Who does that person, what does that person bring to this world? And what do I need to do to get there? And I think if we just took the time and are more grounded, more aligned, and more aware in that messy middle, because in that messy middle, our thoughts are going all over the place, and it's really hard to stay grounded in it because you have all these different things coming at you at the same time, and you're not yourself anymore. So sometimes it's the question of, well, who am I, and how does this new person respond to this scenario that just happened, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's actually how we came up with our title for this podcast, The Comeback Season, is because so many of us are coming to the end of a phase of life. For example, I have one child left at home. He's going to be a senior next year. And then my husband and I are going to be empty nesters or free birds or whatever you want, whatever term you want to use. And you kind of look at yourself and think, who am I if I'm not parenting these children that I've been raising for the last 20 plus years? And we all have a lot of life left in us. And so that's why we're naming this the comeback season, because we are coming back to ourselves and we're rediscovering who we are and who we want to be. You said a term earlier. I think you said the word emerging. Is that the word you used? What's emerging in me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when you said that, it made me think of a butterfly, because in the cocoon, it's still that same creature, but it's just developing into something else.
Chrissy, it's so interesting you say that, because I did a keynote speaking engagement in Vancouver about a month ago, and it was with a leadership team. And one of the things, I talked about was this messy middle actually is about shedding. And I had the metaphor of a chrysalis. And if you think about it, the caterpillar turns into a mucky mess before it becomes the beautiful butterfly. And really, I see that messy middle as being that mucky mess of the butterfly having to sort of dissolve and shed before it becomes its beautiful next self.
That is so true. Christy, you just brought up a very good point, and there's a lot of listeners that are going to be able to relate to this. And I actually also talk about this in my book, that transition of the empty nesting. And it's not even just necessarily empty nesting, because let's be honest, a lot of kids, young adults, can't afford to live on their own. So they're staying home a lot longer than, let's say, our generation did. But there is 100% a transition of learning your new role, call it. Like, how do I respond to this new role? And you lose, you lose the ability to feel comfortable in that role, because you've had this hat you've had to wear for so many years. And it did become my identity. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people there that are doing the empty nesting thing, that their parenting has transformed into a different butterfly.
I was going to say, it's, when we're raising kids, the role is so defined.
Yes.
And then you get to the other side of it, and it's not as defined anymore.
That's good. That is so true. Because what is the definition? And everybody's so different. Absolutely. That reframe is so powerful. But when you're in it, it still feels so overwhelming, So let's shift this and get a little practical here. How do we actually support ourselves when we're in the thick of it? Which brings us on to our next question. How do we support ourselves in the messy middle? What are the things we can do and what helps us stay grounded? Because that's the big one when everything just feels up in the air.
Yeah, Christy, this question is so close to my heart. I think I'd say the first thing is to give ourselves permission to pause, to not know, to be in that in-between space. That permission itself can be incredibly grounding, just that. And then I guess coming back to your breath, for me, some meditations or just some breathing and some messaging can be so helpful. With everything that outside of us feels so uncertain, our breath can become our anchor. So, one hand on our heart and one hand on our belly, and just feeling the rise and fall for a few moments, that act can bring you home to your body. And from there, you can ask, what do I need in this moment to feel a little bit more supportive? Because you're right, Christy, for everyone, that answer is going to be a little bit different, but it's such an important question. It might be a slow walk, it might be a journal entry, a moment in nature, a glass of water, those micro moments of regulation. And they don't have to be big and they don't have to be perfect, but just inviting us to be present with ourselves. If you'd like, I can do like not even a 2-minute grounding ritual that I use for myself.
That's
Or something.
absolutely.
Okay. So if you'd like to close your eyes and just again, hand on heart, one hand, the other on your belly. And if it feels helpful, just taking in a few breaths. And as you're breathing in and breathing out, you'll notice that your breath naturally starts to settle and to slow. Just take a moment and take a breath in, let it go. And maybe as you're breathing, like exhaling, maybe you can identify something that in this moment you're okay with just letting go. And then when you're breathing in, is there something that you'd like to embrace? And just doing that a couple more times. In through the nose and out through the mouth. And again, you can ask yourself, what is this one thing that I need right now to feel supported? And let the answer be small, gentle, true. Maybe it's water, rest, movement, stillness. And that's it. That breath, that question, that's the beginning of coming home to yourself.
That's powerful. And it actually brought me to realize that I guess on some capacity, I do that through journaling. What am I writing? Just brain dumping everything out in this messy middle and to step back and look at it. What am I avoiding? What am I learning? What's one thing today I can do to honor this in this moment? What about you, Christy? What did you feel there?
Well, it brought to mind the couple of episodes ago when we talked about those anchor habits. We had an episode, Jo-Dee, on how to get through the summer without self-sabotaging. And we talked about these anchor habits, just choosing 1 or 2 anchor habits that we can do every single day. We can show up for ourselves and do those habits to keep us on track and in line with our goals. And I think that all these things are helpful. And it's things like you said, taking a drink of water, going for a walk, do some breathing exercises, get outside, get some good sleep.
All right. Well, moving on to our next question. Christy, you want to take that away?
Sure. Sometimes the most healing thing is simplifying things, like we were saying. And I think it helps when we share our own stories too. So, Jo-Dee, let's talk about your own becoming zone and what it looked like in real life. What does your becoming zone look like recently?
Gosh, well, I shared my story earlier about how it was created. I find that I have many becoming zones.
Mm.
So one of the most recent ones, and it was so interesting because my story is I'm not very good at technology. And I was trying to figure out how to do a carousel on Instagram. I'm not really familiar with Instagram. Like I got the other social media, but this one I'm still learning. And I was getting so frustrated, Nicole, when you're right. And technology, for me, it's not intuitive in some ways. Like the carousel on Instagram, not intuitive. And so, I'm on there trying to figure it out. I'm on AI and I'm asking AI to help me, and it's everything that they're suggesting is not working. So I finally typed into AI. I'm so frustrated right now. Like I could throw my computer out the window. Like I'm pissed. And you know what? AI said back to me, well, of course you are, Jo-Dee, because you're in your becoming zone. Isn't that hysterical? So that's the most recent one. And because I'm using AI, to tweak things and
Yeah.
help me just sharpen my words and my language.
Touche.
And yeah, it was actually able to say, well, yeah, Jo-Dee, like I could not believe it. So that's
So
the most recent one.
that is, and it's one that many people I feel in our generation struggle with. So let me tell you, you are not alone, and chat has encouraged me through those as well. For me, so I'm just going to back up for a second. Writing my book was a transformational time in my life. And I wasn't an author. I didn't have this long life goal of wanting to do it. It was during the height of the messiest middle I've ever been in my life. And just throwing out ideas because I feel like it was the only thing that I could do at the time. I was sick in the moment. I had all these things that were going wrong. I felt like nothing was going right, which was pity party after pity party. I, of course, realized later I had more control in that situation than I realized I did. But it was really the process of launching my book and promoting my book of that messy middle, because I was safe when I just wrote it, and then I published it, but I didn't tell anybody. I didn't do anything with it. And it was because I was in the middle of just not feeling me. And the reason I wasn't feeling me was because I wasn't me anymore. In that process of writing my book, the transition, the transformation, the transparency of my life that I was able to see from at a different lens created this person that I now look back at the girl that wrote the book, and I don't even know if I recognize her as much. And that was just a year ago. So that messy middle can jump you. You feel like you're in the middle and you just get that figured out and you become this next person. And then you transition to the next messy middle. And for me right now, it's the speaking and the podcasts and all these things that we're taking out of our messy middle and becoming. Christy, what about you, my friend?
So, Jo-Dee, just before we hopped on, I was telling Nicole about my day. 5 years ago, right in the height of the pandemic, I was diagnosed with colon cancer. And as women, we like to put ourselves off, and I tried doing that. And one day my husband came up to me and he said, I made you an appointment, go see the doctor. He was really worried about me, and it turned out to be colon cancer. So I had to have a surgery. It was terrible, awful surgery to recover from. And they went in after I was healed and did a colonoscopy, and they didn't get everything. So I had to do the surgery again. And that's been 5 years now. And every 3 to 6 months had to go visit my surgeon and endure this terrible, awful exam so he could see how things were healing and see if anything was growing back. And today I went for my appointment, and he told me, it's been 5 years. I don't see anything. I don't want you back here unless something else comes up. So that was a great blessing. But in the last 5 years, I've had more personal growth than I have in a long time. And, I loved being a mom. I put all my time and energy into being a mom when my kids were young. And as they started to grow up and not need so much from me, and it happens to have fallen in the last 5 years, I was asking myself, who do I want to be when I grow up? What do I want to do with the next 20 years of my life, 30 years of my life? This experience with colon cancer gave me a strong desire to give something back, give something of myself. And that's when I decided to become a coach. And the last 2 years specifically, I've just been on this trajectory of personal growth and learning. And I don't think I have become yet, even though that part of my journey is over with the colon cancer. I don't consider myself that I've become yet. I'm still on this path of learning and growing, and it's not easy. It's not easy to take things on yourself and say, I know I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to figure it out. I don't know who needs my help, but I'm going to figure it out. It's scary putting yourself out there on the internet. And
I struggle with that so much,
Yeah.
that ego and pride.
Yes. And the inner critic too, that Jo-Dee talked about. That inner critic loves to talk to us in our head, and just learning to quiet that inner critic and say, no, what I have to say matters, and it could help somebody. So,
And choose to listen. Like we talked about this last week. Choose to listen to the voice that is positive. We tend to navigate to that critic and all the things that could go wrong and all the things that we're not. And really, it is not serving us. So let's talk about when we're in that messy middle and we're still in that fog and wondering what to do next. People are going to be, okay, well, let's hear some practical tips. I'm in the messy middle, because any human being that's listening to this is in the messy middle in some capacity in their lives right now. So Jo-Dee, can you give us some practical tips that we can do today that we can help navigate us through this messy middle a little easier?
Yeah, of course. I love this question because small shifts can make such a huge difference. And I think that's probably my number one is that often people think that change needs to be big and huge and it's just to be out there. But that kind of change can be so incredibly overwhelming. And often that in itself will prevent people from taking steps. So remembering that small shifts are so incredibly powerful and they deserve to be noticed, named, and celebrated, even the smallest of shifts. And what I know from my clients, often when I'm like amplifying their successes, there's often a yeah, but. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. These are so important to honor and celebrate. I think it's so common for us just to go, yeah. No, celebrate even the smallest successes. So that's one piece for me. The other piece is to remember for me that change doesn't go like this, like whichever way you look at it. Change does this. Right? Like it's not linear, it's not straight. there's backwards and forwards and sideways. And so just appreciating that that change process is actually growth. When we take a step sideways or backwards, that is still growth because it allows us to revisit and deepen what we already know. It's kind of like when we were talking about those teachable moments, hey?
Yes. Why do we all feel like we have to know the exact finish line? We need to know what the outcome, I mean, none of us are ever going to know what the outcome is.
Yeah.
You just need to know what your next step is. And if breaking that down, it's really what's helped me for sure.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because we were just talking about the workshop I was doing this morning with these beautiful women. And we were talking about that, why is it that we want to just jump to the end? And what these women came to was, it's because I need to control, because I feel so uncomfortable. And in that messy middle, we can feel a loss of control. And so they acknowledged they were just wanting to find some semblance of control.
Mm-hmm.
And really, at the end of the day, it comes down to trusting in ourselves,
I was just going to say self-trust.
believing in ourselves.
I don't think people realize that the brain is listening. And every single time that you follow through on something that you said you're going to do, you're going to build up that trust in yourself a little bit more. And I guess align your actions with who you are becoming. Because it comes down to the fact that so many of us say we're going to do things and I'm going to, conquer this goal. And then we have all the excuses in the world why we didn't conquer that goal, and it keeps us stuck.
It really does. Yeah, it really does. The last practice that I sometimes use is I just call it one true thing. One true thing, sorry. And I ask myself when I'm feeling, like it would be helpful, what's one thing I know to be true today? And it might be I feel tired, or I need connection, or I'm in a process, I'm in the messy middle, whatever that is. That one truth can be such an anchor for us to go, oh, that's what's going on.
Yeah.
And then we can gather day by day, and those actually become a map to becoming.
That's good. I heard something online yesterday, actually, of a response that you need to ask yourself in every situation in life that you feel you don't have control in, or when anger is coming. And that is, what would love do? How would love respond? So that just brings me to think of when you're in that messy middle, the softer you are with yourself, the more likely you are that you're going to get through it faster and you're going to keep going, because compassion is true momentum.
And it's so interesting that you'd say that. And we haven't talked a ton about it, but our inner critic, so many of the women that I work with believe that they have to be cruel. Like I'm talking cruel to move ourselves forward.
In some of our other episodes about how mean we are to ourselves.
Yeah.
And some of the things we say to ourselves, we would not say that to another person. And for me, I find it really helpful to imagine little Christy, because you wouldn't talk to a child like that. And if you imagine yourself as a toddler or something, and what would you say to help that toddler learn how to walk better, or learn how to read, or something like that? That always helps me.
That's really good.
That's so good. That's very good. Did you want to add anything, Jo-Dee, before we wrap this up?
I guess just thank you for allowing me the opportunity to have a chat with the two of you and to share my passion of the becoming zone and how it's unfolding in my world. Thank you for that.
That's it was a pleasure having you, my friend. And before we do our little exit here, why don't you tell us and our listeners, how do they get a hold of you?
Oh, okay. So my website is called soulfulconversations.ca. That's my website for my coaching. And some of my speaking gigs are starting to show up there. So if they want, they can connect with me there. They can email me there as well. And my phone number is also on there. So
Oh, that's so good. Well, this is the becoming zone because it's not easy, but like you said, Jo-Dee, it's sacred. It's where identity is rebuilt and healing becomes real. So if you're in the fog, don't give up. Just keep showing up, even gently.
There's no timeline for healing and no shame in being in the middle. You're becoming. That's the work. Let it be enough for today.
Jo-Dee, thank you for your wisdom and your heart. You are such a sweet soul, my friend. And for all of you listening, you are not alone in your in between. You are not behind. You're on your way to something beautiful. And we are so happy that you came today. Thank you, Jo-Dee.
thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the comeback season. Please remember, the conversations we share here are for informational and motivational purposes only. We are not licensed medical professionals, and this podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace guidance from your doctor or your healthcare provider. Always consult your healthcare team before making changes to your nutrition, your fitness, or your mental health routines. Your health and well-being comes first, and we want you to move forward safely with the right support for your journey.